card. Take one down, pass it around.
Isn't that a song? Like when you go up roller skating or something? Yeah, something like that. Good idea.
Okay, there we go. Here, oh, need one for you.
That's all right. I'll Xerox one of John's.
Yeah.
Thank you. Thank you very much.
I'm Sheri
Treadwell. Rena Coughlin. Nice to meet you.
Ms. Treadwell, good to see you again.
Good to see you all too. Thank you for having me today. Now I'll be honest, I'm coming right out of my editorial board at the Times Union.
Oh, did you?
Straight
You're all
here.
warmed up already.
So, I'm really looking forward to talking to you all.
Right. We were hoping we'd have a bigger crowd. Last week we did when we held the first round.
Yes,
and this
thank
one
you.
is for those who were unable to.
I know. Thank you so much.
Thank you.
I have 2 kids, and I caught one of their stomach bugs, and just
Not
you know
good.
how that can go.
Yeah.
It just goes around the household, right?
Yeah,
I
it
have
does.
3, and they just,
I know.
it's like a
Like a
immune cycle.
petri dish.
Right.
Yeah. Yep. So. Yeah.
Well, for your sake, we're going to introduce ourselves. We had way too many last week to do that, but we thought maybe since our group is a little smaller today. So, Rena, can you start? Let's
Of course. Yeah, I'm Rena Coughlin. I'm with the Nonprofit Center of Northeast Florida. So actually, I'm located here in this building, and our work really is supporting and strengthening the nonprofit sector in Northeast Florida. So we're a membership organization with 300 nonprofit members, foundation members, and business members.
Jason Roth, Public Policy Director at United Way.
I'm Jim Clark, President for Daniel, and I happen to be the chair for District 4 Juvenile Justice.
I'm John Hayman with the Jacksonville Children's Commission.
Leon Baxton with Communities and Schools. Actually, we're officed in the Times Union building.
Oh, no kidding. Let's get a carpool.
Well, Hodges, Jackson Children's Commission.
I'm Steve Gilbert, CEO for Communities and Schools.
Adam Miller, Director of Children's. And I'm Sean Margot, Director of Program Operations and Children's Society.
Okay. So, Sheri, just a couple introductory remarks. We have a half an hour with you, okay, before the next candidate comes in. We represent the Children's Kids Coalition represents about 30 plus nonprofit organizations that serve about 50,000 students, about 1,000 board members. Of course, they're all volunteers and they probably are voters, and about 100,000 parents or guardians who also, many of them are voters too. So we represent a large group of people. This is being filmed. It's being filmed live right now. The camera is over that way. And it's being taped and will be sent out to whoever wants to see it. Our email list is about 4,000. I'm sure other organizations will be emailing it out as well. We take no positions. Well, that's not true. We do take positions and we do advocate, but we don't endorse candidates. Yeah, we don't endorse candidates. So this is being broadcast right now on a Google Hangout, whatever that means, but we're in a Hangout right now, and we'll be on YouTube as well as Google later on. The questions were not given to any of the candidates beforehand. And so there'll be scripted questions by subject matter experts as well as any impromptu follow-up questions based on your response, okay? Our desire quickly for children in the Jacksonville area is that they grow up educated, safe, and healthy. It's very simple, and that's what we want from kids because when their quality of life goes up, everybody's quality of life goes up. So with that, we're going to do 4 different areas: early learning, K-12 education, mental health, and juvenile justice. So we'll start with the early learning question, if that's okay. Well, wait a minute. We want to start with you introducing yourself. And that's the only thing I'm going to time. You have 90 seconds for that. Everything else will not be timed.
My name is Sheri Treadwell. I'm running for House District 11. That includes all of Nassau County, Northeast Jacksonville, and then all 3 Jacksonville beaches. Many consider this to be the most conservative district in the entire Duval delegation. And it does cover a wide stretch of different communities. So a little bit about me. I grew up here in Florida. I had the opportunity to serve in the George W. Bush administration. I was a political appointee at the U.S. Department of Commerce, worked directly with then Commerce Secretary and former Kellogg CEO Carlos Gutierrez, and ultimately had a few different positions there during the course of the Bush administration. So I am a conservative Republican. My main priority, if I am elected to the legislature, will be pursue those relating to our business community and economic freedom and economic opportunities. So I look forward to hearing more about you all, a lot of what you represent, as well as taking your questions. So thank you for having me today.
Thank you, Ms. Treadwell. Early learning?
Yeah, I'll go ahead and take it. And I just want to say I am standing in for Susan Main, who is the executive director of the Early Learning Coalition of Duval. We have 31 early learning coalitions across the state that are sort of quasi-governmental nonprofits that receive the funding from the state and then give it to the providers based on the two largest programs that the state funds, which is school readiness financial assistance and school readiness financial assistance, and the state's voluntary pre-kindergarten program that is open to all 4-year-olds right before they enter kindergarten. We spend roughly $1 billion a year that funnel through those early learning coalitions, and the bulk of that, about 600 million of that, is spent on the VPK, which is for everybody. Your predecessor, or the current incumbent, Janet Atkins, has served as a very important voice on the education committee for many years. She chaired K through 12, but also was very vocal in her support of early learning. What is your stance on increases in early learning funding and increase in quality standards so that we have a good method of directing money, not only to help more kids, but also ensure that they receive a quality early learning education opportunity?
As it relates to early learning, I have read a lot of different studies that show how key early learning is to later development, the later development of students. And I think it's wonderful that we have the voluntary pre-K programs that we do. And I think that that does allow our children to be more successful in the classroom and later on. In terms, what were the specifics of your question?
Increases in early learning funding. What is your stance, thoughts on increases in early learning funding and the need for increased quality standards for programs that receive these dollars? Let me just put this into context. We spend roughly about $1 billion a year, as I said. But last year and the year before, received early learning as a whole received about 1.5% increase. So it's really not keeping pace with the time and attention that we're paying to K-12 or higher education.
Oh, okay.
Even though it's not, the big behemoth that K-12 is, 1.5% isn't even keeping up with inflation.
Okay.
So
I see. Okay. I hadn't really heard if there were any problems. As far as I know, things seem to be doing very well. So your issue is just more about that the funding hasn't kept up with the demand and hasn't kept up even with inflation.
correct.
Okay. I think that that's fair. I'll be honest, I don't know what the reasons were behind that or what the ins and outs were. I actually didn't realize that it was only a 0.5% increase. So, you should know that I am an advocate for early education, early learning. I hope that I hope that more and more students and families would take advantage of it and that the program would naturally expand as a result. So,
Do you know, have you ever heard of Guiding Stars or Duval or know what a quality rating and improvement system is?
I do. I am familiar with the quality rating and improvement system. Haven't heard of
Guiding Stars is the quality rating and improvement system.
Is it? Okay.
Duval runs.
I just didn't know the name. There you go.
It's fairly unique, and only a handful of early learning coalitions throughout the state have the QRIS acronym. Would you support the expansion of quality rating improvement systems or possibly a statewide?
In what way? Expanding them in what way? What do you mean?
To be more of a statewide model so that we can direct our tax dollars through VPK and school readiness to higher quality rated providers and centers so that we're rewarding high quality versus just low quality.
I do believe in rewarding high quality and people who, who meet and exceed standards. I think that's a good thing to reward. In general, I support local communities making local decisions, but when it comes to standards, typically, I think that we should be measuring ourselves and being able to compare ourselves state to state, making sure that it's not just how does Duval County compare to Volusia County and to Hillsborough County, but much like our K through 12 system, we have our standards are set so that our kids are not only competing nationally, but we live in a global economy. And so, I would be supportive of having a statewide standards, I think. But at this point, I'll be honest, I'm not all that familiar with exactly how those standards work, how similar or dissimilar they are from county to county.
Well, we look forward to having more conversations about it, but thank you for being
here. I guess I actually wasn't even aware that it was a local, I kind of just assumed it was a state standard.
A lot of people assume that it is.
Okay, I didn't know that.
In fact, what's been proposed in the past is that the state legislature say, okay, these are the top 3 or 4, and the rest of the counties need to say, okay, I need to adopt one of those standards rather. So you still give some local autonomy, but at the same time, you don't leave certain counties that I have in my mind, which are riddled with poverty, even south of us, riddled with poverty because they're not paying attention to quality. So that way, it still gives local autonomy, but does kind of it centralizes the message that quality is important.
Okay.
And another issue we hope that you will become more educated on with early learning, because as you know, with your own kids, or your own family.
As in, my early learning is based on what I know from my kids' school, and I know that they have these very strict standards. And they told us their statistics and how they measure up when the kids enter into pre-K and what their performance. And so I just assumed these performance levels were state standard.
No,
I didn't
there's
realize
405 early learning centers in the city.
Okay.
And only about 160 of them are being monitored, just so you see. With any kind of a quality standard. So if they're going to receive state dollars, which JCC has passed through dollars as well from the state that are matched by state dollars, we want to make sure that the parents are sending their kids to 3 and 4 and 5-star quality, sort of like a hotel, 5-star quality hotels, that they're sending them to a quality early learning center. But the other issue,
the ones that don't, just real quick, so I understand, the ones that don't that don't adopt those state standards or meet them, then don't receive state funding.
Exactly.
Oh, okay.
They currently do.
They currently do.
Right. We have school readiness, which is a financial assistance program for low-income Floridians, ensure that parents are able to go to work. And then VPK, which has a very minimum standard of quality attached to it. We have some newer standards that came down through the Child Care and Development Block Grant that the feds just put, because we match a lot of dollars feds give. So we have some very minimal standards, but really you could set up a mom and pop shop and start taking school readiness dollars with very minimum quality standard. So this is a much larger conversation. So we're happy that you're open to continue to have it.
Right. So Susan Main is really the expert in this area too. And for the last 2 years, there's been no kindergarten readiness. In other words, we don't actually know how well we're doing here in DuPont, neither do the other 66 counties, which we hope that our delegation will start to pay attention to. And the Office of Early Learning really needs to get their act together.
Okay, I'm glad you talked to me. I mean, I've been making a lot of assumptions.
We'll be happy to sit down and talk to you.
K-12. Are there any follow-up questions on early learning? Okay. K-12?
Sheri, as we transition into K-12 education, public education remains a key issue in every legislative session, whether it be around funding, accountability, or specific policy issues. Two-part question. Number one, what are your priorities in K-12 education in the upcoming legislative session? And also, what do you think are some of the biggest issues facing our schools this year in the legislative session that they should address?
K through 12. So the first question is, what are my personal priorities?
Correct.
And the second one is overall kind of what the issues are. So let me talk to you about, here's my perspective when it comes to education. I've told you most of my background has been primarily in economic and business policy. And for me, that's very closely married to education policy. At the U.S. Department of Commerce, we spend a lot of time talking about or looking at trends for America's competitiveness. And those trends were oftentimes linked to how we were projected to perform due to our workplace readiness and the skills in our workforce. Now, this was years and years ago. I haven't seen anything, I don't work there anymore. But there were very troubling trends when it comes to our performance in STEM fields. Now, here in the United States, our economy isn't so much driven on, cheap labor and manufacturing. We are a world leader when it comes to innovation, when it comes to technology, when it comes to research, development. And so if we're going to continue to maintain our competitive advantage and to continue to maintain our leadership status in the global economy, we've got to continue to be the leaders in those STEM fields. And we see some very troubling, or did see some very troubling trends in that. Now, we make up a lot of that due to the fact that we are still considered to be the country where the best and the brightest want to come, want to live, want to work, want to pursue better opportunities. So we not only have wonderful students who come up and excel through our education program, but we also attract people from all over the world and attract the best and brightest here in the United States. And so we make up for a lot of our trend lines in that regard as well. So some of my priorities in education, especially K through 12, will be making a greater focus on science, technology, engineering, mathematics. We need to push kids, I'm sorry, not push, but expose them. I think a lot of it is just an exposure problem. They don't understand necessarily what's out there, how much you can make, or what opportunities are available to them. And then secondly, I kind of see on the other side of things, we do have a real lack in trades, particularly here in Florida as the economy is turning around. And I've been endorsed by the Builders Association. There's a major lack of good tradespeople. And I think, again, another big part of that is due to exposure. And one of my favorite examples is a woman who used to be the music teacher at my daughter's school. She would come in, I think, once or twice a week. Very, very talented artistic woman. She did painting, she did music, and I mean, everything you could imagine. She was extremely artistic and talented. But by trade, she was a welder. That's what she did. And, so I'm trying to picture her, and then she explained to me that what she did and made her money was she created irrigated topiaries for theme parks, for hotels and other places like that. Very beautiful, artistic, creative, and yet very practical. And she was a welder by a tradesperson. And I think that a lot of students just they aren't really exposed to that. And so they go and major in 19th century art history, and then they can't find, because they're creative people, but then they can't find a job. Whereas here's a perfect example of a creative person having a professional, tangible outlet that's providing for their family and giving them a living wage. So for me, those are kind of the two areas that I'd like to focus on. Our STEM fields, and then our not contractor, but our trades. And I think that those are probably the priorities in the legislature. We also need to kind of reevaluate some of our, there's been a lot of controversy about our testing and our standards, and, we went through a revamp process and it didn't really kick off all that well. So I think that that's a big concern for a lot of my constituents, and I think that it's a conversation a lot of people are having in the state level as well. So, that I'd like to be part of that conversation too, and would be supportive of revisiting some of those.
I don't know if you're familiar with after-school funding. It's called 21st Century Community. It flows through the state, from the feds through the state, and then the state writes some more of their regulations and rules. Some of them are absolutely ridiculous. Jacksonville will, for the first time, not apply for those dollars.
Wow.
You want to bring those dollars. I mean, it's millions of dollars to Jacksonville, but that's how out of control the 21st century rules and regs have gotten. So we're trying to fight it on the state level with other children's services councils, which we are one of. But we sure would love the delegation to hop on this issue. We have not told the delegation much about this, but we need to. We need to get more public about it.
I'd love to have that conversation. And I'm, in general, for rolling back regulation.
Yeah.
So
yeah,
I think
we'll meet.
okay. I would love to talk about that.
because it is ridiculous.
Okay.
We have two other subjects. Any follow-ups for K-12? Because that actually is a hot topic to K-12. Are you, if you don't mind me asking, because I've asked other candidates, are you sending your kids to public school? You
We plan
to?
on it. Mhm.
Okay, very good.
That was the first thing we looked at when we were buying our first home was the school district. Now you can, that was before the law was passed,
Right.
you can basically go anywhere, but
Right.
that was the first thing we looked at was school districts.
Very cool. Thank you. Mental health, how about if we skip to that and then come back to juvenile justice?
Good afternoon. This afternoon. Thanks for being with us. I usually go up to Yulee to Coastal Pizza.
Okay,
They're
great.
delicious. Are you familiar with it?
So I'm more familiar actually with Tony's there on the island.
Okay.
Yes.
Yeah,
I will check out Coastal
Always
Pizza.
tell the owner, put a shout out.
Uh-huh.
He's a mover to Jackson.
Okay. Got it.
Yesterday, and before I go into my question, yesterday 7 people were shot in Eureka Gardens here. Then yesterday, a middle school and a high school had to relocate their teachers because there was a threat. And when we talk about mental health with young people, it's a real serious issue. Last year, Florida was ranked 49 out of 50 in the nation when it came to mental health services. Duval County has been identified as one of the main problem areas in the state when it comes to providing mental health services. Last year, the legislator passed legislation that made changes to mental health services in the criminal justice system. If elected, how do you think you can improve mental health services, primarily for children with mental health problems? And do you see mental health as a local or a state issue? And what would you like to see happen or change with the mental health system?
So I was just asked about this actually. That's an area that I am not familiar with, and I've had a lot of conversations about. I'm trying to learn about. Everything from, for example, most people say that they'll here locally and in the state, the biggest provider, the biggest mental health institutions are jails, unfortunately.
Mm-hmm.
So I've met with people from the criminal justice communities, including both of our sheriffs, and we've talked about these types of issues. I've met with NAMI. I've talked to a lot of my constituents who are very passionate about these types of issues. And whether it's a criminal justice issue, whether it's an educational issue, or God forbid, a lot of times the tragedies and mass shootings that we see, whether, if they're not terrorists, a lot of these tragedies, the person fits the same profile. And anyway, I think that by looking more into mental health, I think that there's certainly savings to be had. What the role of the government is, what the role of our nonprofits are, what the role of healthcare, whatever it might be, I think that's still kind of something we're all trying to figure out and how to tackle it. I don't have the answer for that yet, but I think that it's something that we have to start paying more attention to, unfortunately, because we've had so many tragedies that have been related to mental health. So, so anyway, I would be supportive of us looking more into that for sure.
Sorry, just as a follow-up, we work with full service schools, which are kind of community centers throughout the Duval County school system. We're in 9 high schools, and one of the primary services that they offer at full service schools is mental health counseling. Mm-hmm. One of the primary obstacles that we have is an ability to offer mental health counseling to children, which, at the time, mental health illness, the front lines are in our classrooms. Mm-hmm. Part of the problem that we have is being able to find enough funding to provide mental health counseling to those children, because the mental health, first of all, the field doesn't pay a lot. It's one of the lowest paying professions in the healthcare industry. And second of all, it's the reimbursement rate through some of our lower income healthcare programs, such as Medicaid, is very, very low for mental health specialists and psychiatrists. So
let me ask you guys a question, and maybe this is a conversation for another day. So if it is, just tell me that. Is anybody? It feels like to me there's an increase of mental health problems in general, whether it's adults or children. I don't know if that is the old thing of we've always misdiagnosed, but it actually seems like there's more of an increase in mental health illnesses. And so if that's the case, has anybody started to study why? Do we actually know what the root is going on here?
Well, there are several studies that have made suggestions and verification. Breakdown in the family, that's one. It's a more complex world. You used to have 3 TV stations, and now you have 180. So we're much more of a buzz society in terms of the pace of things, which do impact certainly young people and their brains. The other is we've not changed with the times. I mean, I think there was some discussion at the school board forum that was sponsored. We're kids can go to school year round, but they don't. And so the learning curve and all the other things that perhaps provided stability for a family and for a child are different today, in my opinion, than they are. And there's some research that follows that as well.
I think you have a basic philosophical question. Is it nature or nurture? Is it the environment or the variables around the environment, which is of course nature, which is nurture, of course, how a child grows up and in what situations. I think, C.S. Lewis said the mind and body live so close to each other, they pick up one another's diseases. So there's not always a clear answer why, but I think, first of all, as a Duval delegation potential member, you have the experts actually in this room and as members of the Kids Coalition when it comes to children, because they are the providers. It's not the people at the department up there in Tallahassee. It really is the providers. A couple of them are right here in the room right now, including Jim. But recognize this awful reality. Those shootings that you're referring to did not happen in the poor areas of our cities. None of them did. And so we have to broaden our scope and our paradigm that mental health has really not much to do with poverty. Right. And we're fighting the wrong enemy sometimes. We think if we fix the poverty, the mental health will go down. It may be concentrated there, or the recognition of mental health. It's my personal belief that the percentage has not gone up. We're just recognizing more of it now. And some of the models that we have done here in Jacksonville has helped kids go get help before it's too late. But that's another conversation as well. But there are models here that I think are dealing very well, and both these organizations are dealing with it.
John, can I?
Yeah.
I just want to offer 2 resources for you. Michelle Braun, the CEO of the United Way, chaired a mental health study just a year and a half ago, looking at all the indices around mental health for our community.
All the what around mental?
The indices. So that's a good place to start. And then all of
United Way local areas.
It's actually through the Jacksonville Community Council, JCCI.
I don't mean to be rude.
Yeah.
I'm gonna write this
You can go on their website and see the reports too.
Yes.
It's very good.
It's called
JCCI.
Yeah.
Yes, yeah, I'm familiar. But you said this is through.
Well, Michelle Braun.
My boss,
chaired-
my president,
she
shared the study
chaired the
through
study.
JCCI.
Oh, I see.
But it was a community report.
Okay.
Right.
And then the hospitals in our area have just issued their community health assessment report, released it. So it's Mayo, Baptist, Memorial, and UF Health. And they look at, what are the needs in the community? What are the unmet needs? How do we balance them? What's our work in the community? And there was a large focus on community attention to mental health. So that also may help sort of give you the landscape of, for both adults and children.
Yeah.
And if you don't mind, for the sake of time, we did want to get a question in on juvenile justice.
Thank you so much.
My pleasure.
On juvenile justice in 2015, civil citations, which were alternative to arrest, were issued to 45% of eligible children here in Florida. Yet here in Duval County, only about 28% of eligible children receive civil citations. The legislature has looked at this issue over the years. Had the bill last session that did not succeed, but it's raised a lot of questions on the parameters and use of civil citations. So our question for you today is, What is your opinion of the use of civil citation for juvenile, particularly first-time offenders? And are there any particular offenses that you exclude the use of civil citations?
So civil citations as opposed to arrests. And give me some examples of where the civil citations will be used.
Well, again, first-time offenders
For,
First-time nonviolent.
okay, first time non,
petty
okay.
thefts,
Kids steal
Okay.
something.
Well, but one of the debates has also been, that term nonviolent, if you're talking about two kids in a school getting into a fight, there are times when one of them gets charged with battery. Is that a civil citation arena or an arrest arena?
But that gets deeper in the weeds, though. But what is your feeling?
So first I'll tell you that I don't know much about it, but based on the information that I have here, in particular, the example you used, in a school or petty theft or things like that, I think a lot of times it's probably good to allow for some discretion. The local police officer for the school or whatnot would be able to know, was this just kids, fighting over a girl, or fighting over lunch and they stole his lunch, or, is this just kids school fights, which have always been around, or is this a dangerous situation and something that we need to be taken more seriously? Questions as to whether there was gang involvement or drugs, or, I think a lot of times I hesitate to give these kind of blanket, hard, fast rules, because sometimes it's a matter of the facts of the situation. So especially when you're dealing with juveniles. So I would want to give a lot more discretion to the people who are in the situation, rather than saying, okay, if there was a physical altercation, they're going to jail, and that's an arrest because that's serious and violent, versus, allowing for another form of disciplinary action that perhaps is a little bit more appropriate given the situation. So I hope that answers your question. Okay.
And it's like what we're talking about mental health, this is a conversation we have.
Right.
And I hope we have the opportunity to see our
Right.
overall issue of justice and prevention versus
Right. Right. I'm afraid that when the state starts getting involved and you start having these one size fits all, you lose a lot of the ability to address the heart of the situation.
If I can give you some additional information as well, is that there is statute that's been created to allow local boards to create programs and to help with intervention and prevention. Secretary Daley, years ago, I'll say 15 years ago, our community had the opportunity maybe to designate, because we know our community, up to maybe $3 million of state funding that came down that we as a board could determine. For the last several years, until this year, we've not had that discretion.
Oh.
It's always been Tallahassee who has made a determination. This year, we were fortunate. We got $40,000. We were able to direct that as a board and as a community to the Dolores Bar Weaver, we felt were doing some very good things. My point is, I'll give you another perfect example. 15 years ago, over 200 kids who had committed a felony, first-time offense, were able to go into a program where they were monitored, where they were supervised, and 200 kids from our local community, and 80% of those kids 1 year afterwards did not have any criminal activity involvement. Again, Secretary Sheri, during that particular time, came in and said, well, I don't think your community should have that money. I want to use that money for this way. So we lost that $1 million. So you multiply, 10 years times 200. Those are the amount of lives that we possibly, as a community, could have saved. So in every district in Florida, and our district is 4, we have a group of people that's designated by statute that sit on a board that help advise the department. And I think and it's great because we have the state attorney, we have, what's Rob Mason? Public defender, along with the school officials, sheriff's department, and others who can debate issues in terms of what we think would be effective. And for an example, in Broward County, every child who has a misdemeanor goes automatically to a civil citation board, automatically. That's not the case here. Only 28% of those youth. Most of those youth are minority who get. We have the largest rate of incarceration in the state as it relates to those youth who are pushed over. If you're wealthy and you have the means, it doesn't happen. So we hope that you could be an advocate as we approach the secretary about programs that we think Boys and Girls Club, Children's Home Society, Daniel, that are effective in terms of helping this kind of population.
And I just want to put a capstone on that because we're at time and actually over and we had someone else waiting. The organizations, no, it's fine. This has actually been a lot more looser and more relaxed than we were the other day. The organizations represented around this table represent a very deep breadth and depth of knowledge about children's issues in all of these areas. We just want to make sure that you know that we're a resource to you here during your campaign and if you get elected as a state representative. So please give us a call. Let us know.
Is there a way
how we
I'll
can
be
help
able to
you.
get everyone's contact information?
Yes.
Okay.
We'll provide that to you.
Okay, thank you.
Yeah.
Because I would love to get your business cards, but at the same time, I know there's a lot of people missing, so
We'll be sending an email
Okay, thank
around
you.
to everybody
I
to
appreciate that.
tell
Yeah,
them
that's good.
where.
Okay.
So if you want to take a shot at 1 minute concluding remarks, please feel free to, and then we
Okay.
gotta.
So again, I'm Sheri Treadwell. I'm running for House District 11. I appreciate what you all do in giving back to our community. Your heart for our children is, something that's going to impact us for generations. Being a mom, this is something that's very near and dear to my heart, and it's something that I care about not only as it affects my own personal family, but here as it affects our region. And we face a lot of complex issues, especially being, the greater Jacksonville area. We have some very urban issues. We have some very rural issues that we face. We're a very unique area, but a lot of our problems are not unique in that they aren't seen all over the state. So I appreciate you being a resource for me. I hope to be able to be a resource and a partner for you all. So thank you again, and thanks for having me. If you want to know more information just about me or my campaign, you can always go to my website, votetreadwell.com. That's votetreadwell.com. It's also on the back of your brochure. And I look forward to being in touch. Thank you.
Thank you. Thanks for your time. Thank you.
Good to see you again.
See you soon.
Good luck with it.
Thanks.
If we could, let's just reset as quickly as possible.
Reboot.
We wouldn't use that term 20 years ago. would we?
No, we wouldn't. We wouldn't even know what that meant.
Yeah.
Appreciate you running.
Appreciate it. Thank you.
Thank you
Nice to
very
see you.
much. Nice to see you. Thank you.
We'll be in touch.
Okay, you got it.
Thanks so much.
Thank you.
Good to see you.
Hey, I love today.
I'm well. How are you?
Covered for you last week. Yeah, you guys.
No way. I'm like
It's good to see you.
a bystander.
Hey,
Hello?
hey, Rita, how are you?
Yeah,
Doing
good.
good? Good to see you. How are you? Good to see you. You doing good? Good to see you. Looking good.
Thanks.
How are you?
Well, good.
It's good to see you again. You doing all right?
Yes.
Hey, how are you? You been all right? Last time we saw each other was at the elementary.
That's right, that's right. Yes, sir.
Hey, good to see you again. Been all right? Good.
Exactly right.
Hey there. Good to see you again. Yes, sir. Thank you. How you been?
Good.
Good. How are you?
Yeah,
Yes.
Hey, how you doing?
Good. Good to see you. Thank you. Yes. I'm gonna do what y'all told. Okay.
Right there. There's some water there if you want it.
Thank you. I appreciate it.
We tossed out the little candidate placard sign that we had.
Oh, well.
It's really one on there.
I sat down at one thing a few weeks ago, and I had to make sure I remembered my spot there. You know, I think it's more for us to remember where we were supposed to sit. And all that. So everybody doing good?
Yeah. Mr. Yarborough, we just are very grateful that you took time out of your busy schedule.
Thanks for the makeup session. I'm sorry I couldn't do it before, so appreciate y'all.
And our room was full the last few days, so it's not so much today. But we represent a number of organizations, over 30, that serve about 50,000 kids with about 1,000 board members. Those board members, of course, mostly are voters, we would imagine, because they're volunteer folks from the community, and about 100,000 parents, who probably a great majority of them are voters as well. So the impact of this group, even though there's not large numbers here today, is pretty broad in our community, as you well know. You have a rich background, both from City Council and also your work with Frank H. Peterson, where you graduated from. So we've had 23 candidates, a couple more today, so we're up to about 25. Just not in the school board. School board, of course, being handled by JPEF. The second one is tonight, their candidate forum. So just wanted to say that this one is being filmed. It's live right now. The camera is over there, and it's being broadcast on a Google Hangout. That means we're in a hangout right now, whatever that means. But it will also be available for people to look at later, and also on YouTube as well, just so you know. None of the questions have been given to any of the candidates. We have 4 main areas, and that is early learning, K-12, mental health, and juvenile justice. They'll be asked by 4 different folks here. There may be impromptu questions that might be asked afterwards, depending on your answer, and we'll go from there. So the only thing I'm going to time is we're giving you 90 seconds to introduce yourself, and then we'll get into the questions.
All right, I appreciate it. Thank you. Thank you. And good afternoon, everybody. Thanks again for the opportunity to come and do the makeup. Appreciate you taking your time to do it. I'm Clay Yarborough, and served for 8 years on our city council here in Jacksonville. Termed out about a year ago, and we had the city elections that came around. Just excited to be here, excited to be a part of the process. And I would say I know pretty much everybody who's here, and I know there are others who are part of the process that are not here today, but I don't want to spend a lot of time looking in the rearview mirror, but I will acknowledge, and everybody here knows that definitely someone who was pretty critical when I was in my first term on the city council, as far as not only funding, but certain policy matters and different things that affected a lot of areas, not just nonprofit or other services in the community, which we're talking more about today, but really had a pretty firm critical eye on those things. But I think over the years, and talking to experts more in the field that knew these things and knew what we needed to do to get the right things in place, really came around and had more of a well-informed, well-rounded perspective on those issues. And so again, not to revisit that too much, but just wanted to say that eventually I believe I came to the realization that, one, we definitely would see a return on investment when we were investing the dollars into the services that were needed into the community for children and for those who had mental health struggles and things of the like, and all of that. But also we didn't have anywhere else to go for those services, and so we really had a great need in our community. And in some cases, we were leaving a lot of folks, and in particular children, out if we were not making those investments. So it was really in the second term when I kind of came around to that and thought about it more and really deliberately made that decision. Probably also impacted me when I had kids. I think so. I have 3 boys now. I have twins who are almost 4, and I have their little brother who just is about to turn 8 months on Sunday. And everything. Cool. So it's a joy to be a dad and a husband, and I love my boys. And thankfully, they look like their mother. But anyway, so I'm thankful for that. And that started that perspective change too. And I think I'm all the better for that as well. And and everything. So I definitely understand from a state perspective, funding, of course, is critical, and we need to make sure that we're aware of that, and we're working toward that common good goal of what we need to do. So anyway, I don't want to ramble too much, but that's.
And as you know, being a dad is your most important job.
Absolutely.
We have the 4 questions, but before we do, since we have a smaller group, can we just go quickly around the table and introduce ourselves, where we work, so you have a feeling?
Rena Coughlin with the Nonprofit Center, and Clay, I'm going to apologize. I have a 1:30 conference call, so I'm going to sneak out. Thank you for coming.
Thanks. Jason Roth, Director of Public Policy here at United Way.
Jim Clark with Daniel, and Chair of the Juvenile Justice Board for District 4.
John Hagel with the Jacksonville Children's Commission.
Leon Baxton, Communities and Schools.
Steve Gilbert, I'm the CEO for Communities and Schools.
Adam Miller, I'm the new Communications Manager at Jacksonville Children's Commission.
Sean Noggle, Director of Program Operations with Children's Home Society.
Very good. So we'll get into our first round, and that would be about early learning.
I just want to say I am standing in and doing a pale of comparison for Susan Main, who is
Susan.
Executive Director of the Early Learning Coalition of Duval. She couldn't be here today. She really wanted to. I can liken to your comments about being a dad and learning about, certain issues having to do with our children. That sort of blossomed my passion for early learning and education advocacy is when my kids, went through the early learning system and then to the K through 12 system. Florida's early learning system is comprised of about 5,000 for-profit, religious, and nonprofit childcare programs, along with private and public school programs. They receive state and federal funding administered by 31 nonprofit agencies known as early learning coalitions throughout the state. The state spends roughly $1 billion a year on two main programs, which are school readiness financial assistance and Florida's voluntary pre-kindergarten program, which is free for all 4-year-olds. What's your stance on increases in early learning funding and the need for increased quality standards for programs who receive these tax dollars?
Thank you for the question. I'll kind of take a stab at the second part of the question first. Definitely have to have high standards. It ties into when you're giving public dollars to anything, whether it's something like this with these programs or whether it's any priority that the state or local or even the federal level would have. Obviously, you need to see the return on your investment, but you need to have measurable standards in place so you can check it against. Are we doing what we say we're going to do? Are we actually spending the dollars on the purpose that we've allocated them for and all of that? What I will not do if elected to serve, and I tried really to work on this at the local level, is not tell those who are the subject matter experts in these areas what we need to be doing, but more have that listening ear and be open to what are you seeing, what are you hearing, what are the needs out there, what do we need to be focusing on, and all of that, so that we make sure we prioritize the dollars to where we need them to be and make sure they're effective. So kind of tying that together again with the second part of the question, definitely support the high standards, and I'm sure the state, just like the local level, has that evaluation process that they go through to make sure that the dollars are being used the way that they, if not they should, but that the dollars are being used or should be used the way that they have been allocated to do and all of that. So definitely support the high standards. As far as the actual funding and all of that, you asked, I think, specifically about an increase. I want to hear from the folks that are affected by it, kind of like I'm saying. If we need to look at increases in that, definitely a worthy investment that we need to consider. And if we see that the dollars that are going in aren't adequate enough, then we need to consider that and potentially do that if the dollars are available across the spectrum, because I don't just want to single out and say, well, we're going to, just like at the local level, we'll keep giving an increase maybe in a budget year that's down where everything else across the board might have been reduced. You have to be careful how you balance all that out. But on the whole, if the if the dollars are available and there's more to be able to invest there, then I'm certainly open to that.
You set up my follow-up question, which was, what the guiding stars of Duval system is?
I know a little bit about it. Where we have the star rating for the establishments. Yeah.
It's considered a quality rating and improvement system,
right,
or QRIS for short. Yeah. Even though we spend about $1 billion a year in VPK and school readiness, there's very low quality standards that are attached to that. Basically, what's just required for health and safety standards. And you can set up a mom and pop shop and receive school readiness funding with very, very low quality. To put the funding in perspective, last year and the year before, early learning received about 1.5% increase year over year, as compared to the record amount of funding that we tout for K-12 education. Early learning really is not keeping the same pace, and actually, when you count inflation, we're going below. A couple of years ago, we did implement a system that incentivized. It was a pilot program, and it's slowly expanding, where it tied certain funding through school readiness to quality standards. Would you be in favor of either expanding, tying quality standards to school readiness and VPK, or maybe even a statewide quality rating and improvement system? The Guiding Stars of Duval is one of maybe about 5 programs throughout the state. It's not uniform across the state at all.
Gotcha. That was a 2-part question. Yes to the first one, absolutely, tying it to that, and then open to a statewide uniform policy if that makes the most sense, so that you don't have this one doing this and this one doing this. I've never heard anything but good about our Duval model. I would defer to y'all to, y'all know these things, but maybe that's a model we'd have to get the buy-in from the rest of the state, I'm sure. But, if it's a model that works, then we should look at using that.
I'll just tell you this, and then we can move on to the next section. For the past 2 years, Susan Main, with the help of Senator Bean, has gotten $500,000 to implement a pilot program to prove the guiding stars as a possible statewide model. It has been vetoed for 2 years in a row.
Interesting. Even if we could get to the point we would accept 4 or 5 of the best in the state, we would at least start, really some of those counties that don't have any rating system whatsoever up to snuff. It would really be powerful for this, for kindergarten readiness. We want the kids ready for kindergarten statewide. So, good. Any follow-up questions on early learning? All right, let's go to K-12. Steve?
Yarborough, thanks for being with us today. Thank you for your support over the years of communities and schools. We really appreciate your support. In the area of K-12 education, public education remains a key issue in every legislative session, whether it's around funding, accountability, or specific policy issues. 2-part question. Number 1, what are your priorities in K-12 education in the upcoming legislative session? And number 2, what do you think are the biggest issues facing our schools that the legislature should address?
Appreciate that. As the son of a 43-year retired public school educator, we've had a lot of conversations around the kitchen table. My dad retired from Landmark Middle School. He was there the last 20 years of his career as guidance counselor. And then before that, he was a math and history teacher. And we spent a lot of time, like I said, at the kitchen table talking about education priorities and things of that nature. And so definitely something that was near and dear to the heart of our family. As far as the priorities, one thing that I think I've heard this a lot from the business community, and I know y'all have heard it as well, is making sure that when our students are coming out of high school, that they are, of course, college ready, but they're also work ready. If they, whatever path that might be that they are looking at going in, and we need to make sure that's certainly maintained. But one of the things that we've heard from business is we need to make sure that our students are prepared for, of course, we have high tech jobs and things like that in certain sectors, but we need to make sure that we have at the community college level or at the university level, or even in some of the high school programs, have programs that are geared toward getting them to be work ready. I think a good example is if they still have it, y'all would know, I think Vistacon and Wolfson had their partnership where you had a certain number of students that could actually begin to go in and get some on-hand, some firsthand work experience there, and then be ready for a job, to occupy their time, I think full-time once they got out of high school. Those are great. That's a great example of a partnership that they've done. Other programs kind of the like to get students prepared again, either to go to college or go to the workforce, whether it's an apprentice program or, some other hands-on. I think that's very critical, especially moving into the needs of the future workforce and things like that. I've heard that from manufacturers in the business community, stuff like that. So that's something that we can do. As far as funding, it needs to be adequate. We need to have a world-class education system. We have the public system. We need to make sure it's adequately funded. I'm not going to go over and tell Superintendent Beatty and the school board members what they ought to be doing. I'm going to listen to them. I actually met with Superintendent Beatty probably a couple of months ago now, sat down with him to hear his thoughts, and he told me that 2 of the biggest things were obviously unfunded mandates. That's always a big thing that's a concern. But then in the Duval system, because we have kind of an aged infrastructure, we need funding to maintain our buildings and things like that, capital needs of the, and things of that nature. So that's definitely on the radar. As soon as the top man told me that, I thought, okay, this has got to be important if he's telling me this out of his big, huge system that we have. And I'm a product of Duval County Schools, so I know it from coming through it from that perspective as a student. And as I mentioned, my dad being a part of it too. But want to listen, want to learn. I'm not going to go in and be a know-it-all about all that stuff, and want to look at our priorities that we need, but make sure we have the best system that we can.
Are you in favor of school choice?
I am. Yes, sir.
Yeah. And I hope you'll voice your opinion on capital costs, because there was a year where all capital costs from the taxpayer went to charter schools. It's a very strange year. I don't know if Dr. Beatty shared that with you. So it's back to be a little bit more balanced than it was. But anyhow.
Yeah.
Good. Any other questions along this line? I have asked some of the other candidates. I'll ask you as well. I don't know if you've made a decision yet, but are your kids going to be going to the public school system?
We're still in the process of talking about it and everything. They're in their birthday. We're kind of right near that cutoff. They're born at the end of September, so we're kind of looking at that. They're about to be 4, so they're not quite not quite to yet, but we're definitely having those conversations and praying about it. So
Good. Yeah. Let's skip to mental health then.
Mr. Yarborough, always good to see you, and thank you for your many years of support of communities and schools through Team Up through the Jacksonville.
Yep, I worked in the Team Up program at Landmark.
That's right. And I still remember the visit that you came out to SA Home.
Yep.
And you read to some students and got
Fun
to see
time.
Team Up. So we really appreciate it. It's just good seeing you.
Yep.
When it comes to mental health, last year Florida was ranked 49 out of 50 in the nation when it came to mental health services. Duval County has been identified as one of the main problem areas in the state when it comes to mental health services. Last year, the legislature passed legislation that made changes to mental health services in the area of juvenile justice. If elected, how do you think you can improve mental health services primarily for children with mental health problems? And do you see mental health as a local or state issue? And what would you do to try to make some changes?
Yeah, no, thank you. That's very good. Very good question. I appreciate that. Yes, definitely an issue, and it's not exclusive just to the local level or just to the state level. It's definitely has to be a partnership and working on it. I'll use an example that I know and that I know y'all know. I think that we, and I'll preface it with this, we know that, especially in the case of children, that when they are surrounded by adults who care about them, that's going to do just an enormous amount of gain for them, for their self-esteem, for their academic performance, for even the way they behave at home, just all sorts of different things like that. And if they don't have that structure at home, which a lot of them don't, that are in need, then it's incumbent that we have that support for them and all. And so with that as a preface, the example I was going to say is Cheryl and Warren Grimes over at Big Brothers Big Sisters. And most of y'all know Cheryl and I contended for the same council seat back probably 9 years ago now, I think, when Lake retired from the District 1 seat. A little bit of contention there even after that, but I will say the reason I bring them up is because they, of course, do big work. They do good work over at Big Brothers Big Sisters, but Cheryl and Warren are supporters of my state house race. I worked very hard to try to build a bridge with them after that, and it took a little bit of time, to do that, but definitely tried to. No. I wasn't going to say
That's
that.
true too.
You're on the record. That's right. I was not going to say no. I wasn't going to say no. Definitely not. But I bring it up to say that it was it's a very good relationship that I'm glad we have now. And in meeting with them and listening with them, just as an example, hearing what the needs are, again, from subject matter experts, if you will, that know these issues and know, like in the case of what they do, they put the mentor with the student, and they're putting it in place, actually using that model to make sure that we have that support system around the children and all of that. And that's just one example. I mean, Daniel, of course, has its good work. We have so many examples of things that we, have in place to do that. Communities and schools, with everything from after school to the other community initiatives and all of that. Those are vital for these students, and they don't even realize that for probably many years to come after that. But that's very important. So definitely open to that. And that was one thing I think I came around to on the council, was when I finally started to see, hey, here's the kind of fruit of this labor, so to speak, that these folks are doing and that these programs are doing, made it all the more clear of how essential it was and how important it was, and all of that. So we need to make sure it's adequate. And again, my ear will be listening to those who know this stuff best as the issues come up and everything. So.
Mr. Yarborough, you're probably aware that 21st Century Community Learning Center funding is a block grant that comes from the feds all the way through the state to the locals. And it has gone from an application maybe this thick to an application this thick. It's just ridiculous. And we really hope that our next representatives in Tallahassee will try to straighten that out, because for the first time in all these years, JCC will not be applying for dollars. And it's a loss of millions of dollars, because the system has just gotten too bureaucratic. And
is that the main reason, because of the complexity of it?
Yeah.
It's just not.
And there's no reason for some of the requests, none whatsoever. And so I and others will work with you on that, just to educate you as the days go on. Okay. Yeah, because that's millions of dollars of loss of services to kids here in Jacksonville.
Yeah.
Even though we have one of the largest networks of after school, actually in the Southeast, it's right here in Jacksonville. So, any other questions on K-12? Okay. Or I'm sorry, I meant illness and juvenile justice, Bill.
Yes, sir.
Thank you for your accessibility over the years. Elected officials we work with, I don't know of anyone or willing to sit down and talk to us at any time about our sites, and we appreciate that.
You're welcome, sir.
On juvenile justice, in 2015, civil citations were issued to 45% of eligible children in Florida. Of course, that's the alternative to arrest. And here in Duval County, only 28% of eligible children receive civil citations. The legislature has addressed this issue, but there's still questions around the parameters and under which circumstances civil citations can best be utilized. What is your opinion about the use of civil citations for juveniles, particularly first-time offenders? And are there any particular offenses that you would exclude from the use of civil citations?
Yeah, thank you for the question. I'm trying to remember while you're asking me the question. Trying to remember the ordinance number. It was a resolution, actually. I take that back. It was resolution, I want to say 2014-177. I actually sponsored it. And we were basically conveying the sentiment from the council. We got several co-sponsors to jump onto the bill that said we supported the use and expansion of the civil citation. You'll probably remember that. I can't remember the actual number, but I think it was 177 stands out. But anyway, we did that, and definitely a supporter of that. Especially for the first time offenders. I mean, I will tell you, my work at UPS, which I should have mentioned this when I started, for the past nine of the 12 years I've been at UPS, my job is to shake hands and hire people after selecting them and interviewing them. And a lot of those applicants we have are young people that come in. And a story I usually tell is probably about a year or two ago, I had a young man come in, and he told me he was probably 17, 18 years old, about going his senior year in high school. At either Rebault or Rains up here, and he came in and he said, well, I need a job. I want to get started. I hadn't worked anywhere before. And he said, and I said, why do you want to work here? You know, I ask everybody that. What do you want to do? What's going to be your motivation? He said, I see the bad choices that my cousin and my brother are doing, and I don't want to get involved in that stuff. And so I would rather put my time to better use and my energy to better use and all of that. And I think out of the literally thousands I've interviewed over the past 9 years, that probably one like that has left the most indelible impression on me because of what he said, and very, very mature beyond his years too, to recognize it, but also to say, I don't want to get caught up in the stuff that's not going to be good for the rest of my life, that's going to follow me and all of that. So all that to say, with that as kind of a base and everything, you have some though, and I've interviewed these two that came in and may have done something a year or two prior that wasn't good. They recognize that, they want a second opportunity. They know that there's a risk of something following them on their record or something like that. I support the program if it's we looked at this when we did the resolution, if it's something that's a very egregious crime to another person, or I think there were certain, if it might have had to do with a crime, a weapon, a sexual crime, something egregious like that, then those were ones that were not included in that. But if it was something more of a minor offense, and things like that, then definitely open to the use of that program. And the statistic was alarming too, of how much the other counties were using it and how little we were using it up here as well. I do remember we put that into the bill as well. So, but definitely, anyway, I'm sorry to ramble on all that, but but I thought a very useful program. And then you have the accountability piece too, where the student or the young person or whomever it would be had to be accountable to the adult and the community and to others too, to make sure that they stayed the right path, after that. So anyway, long answer to your short question, but, I think we could better utilize that and, and offer that as something to just throw the book and then, oh, you're scarred for the rest of your life. Forget it. You're not going to be, afforded as many opportunities now and all that, depending on what it is. But so, yeah.
Jim, did you want to answer that?
No, I think Clay, he knows that we're a great resource. The department, one of the biggest issues that there's two that I really see that can be so helpful for you to pay particular attention to, but the bureaucracy just gets impossible anymore.
Yeah.
And we're all for being accountable, but don't be ridiculous. Don't make us do the same thing we have to do for 4 other different bodies, and that happens all the time. The second is just to be real attentive to is that Tallahassee has continued to direct money. Years ago, we were able to get a pot of money as a juvenile justice board and say, we know our community, and here's where we need to put our needs. For the last 5-7 years, maybe perhaps longer, we've not been able to direct any funding appropriately to areas in which that we know are important. We brought this issue for the last, since Secretary Daley has been in her position, And she became sensitive to it. And for the first year, from 8 years ago, maybe $5 million, we got the first time we were able to direct some money this year, which was $40,000. And we were able to direct that to the Dolores Barr Weaver program, because we knew that that was effective and that was something right now in our area that we needed to pay attention to. So I would just ask, know that we can be a resource for you. And number two, anything that we can do locally and have some impact is really so important for us.
Thank you for what you do too.
And as you know, Mr. Yarborough, the nonprofits are, I call it the heart and soul of the city. Without them, we would not know what the needs are on the street, most of the streets that we don't live on. They are your subject matter experts. So anything we can do to inform you, even if it means coming to a committee meeting and giving testimony to anything, please call on us. It's, I will tell you, it is often not the folks in Tallahassee that are the subject matter experts. It's the people that are on the front line, and that's represented here, as well as the larger group that was unable to be here today. So if you don't, thanks. So if you don't mind, if you can give a minute and a half conclusion.
Yeah, sure. Thank you. Thank you. Welcome. Thank y'all again for your time. I appreciate it. Thanks for the opportunity to be here and answer these questions too, because that's the part of this process. Even though it's, sometimes when you don't know the questions and all, it can be a little nerve wracking, but it's good because it sharpens you up and gets you prepared and and all of that too. So definitely appreciate that opportunity. I guess you kind of teed it up, John, and thank you, Jim, for your words too as a reminder. Definitely want to use this group and the bigger group on the whole, as well as subject matter experts. I spent some time talking to Rena not long after I first filed, and went to her and told her, hey, look, what are things you saw for the time, say when I served before, but what are things you saw, and looking ahead, what are things and areas you can get me to focus on that are important, and all of that, and just listen to her. I didn't come asking her for anything. I wasn't trying to get her to connect me with anybody or anything like that. Just wanted to hear what she had to say. And then of course I mentioned, Cheryl and Warren, who I'm in touch with regularly and all of that. But definitely want to hear from, the folks who know, and be accessible. The door's always going to be open. You're always going to get a return phone call. And I'll be there to listen and to learn. And I know we got to hit the ground running and get started. So thankful to have a little bit of local experience to kind of, I know it's not just a big city council. I know there's a lot more going on over there, but at least with that kind of committee experience and, some other things at the local level, and from having some mentors that are already serving over there, and stuff like that, then that'll help me to get over there and transition, Lord willing, and from there. And looking forward to doing it if I have the opportunity. So appreciate y'all and everything y'all do too. So. Yeah,
we're going to send a follow-up email to all the candidates, so that you do have our contact information. That way, if you're so blessed to have been elected, we're here for you.
Sounds good. Thank you all. Appreciate it. You have a good afternoon. Thanks. Appreciate it. Good to see you. Good to see you. Together. Thanks. I appreciate it. Thank you. Good to see you again. Thanks. All right. You too.
I'll wait till you come around.
Yeah, I'm sorry. Thanks. Thank you. Appreciate it. Thanks again for letting me do the makeup. Yeah. Thank you.
All right, thank you.
Good to see you. Thank you. Thanks so much. Appreciate it. Thanks. Thank you. Appreciate it. You have a good